We're going to take a look at how to sort. In order to do the type of sorting that we are going to set up, you do need to use an HTML table. And the header row is the row that is going to control the sorting. So clicking on the header will sort in ascending or descending order. So I got a couple different examples. And if you watch, it switches from ascending to descending order. And how you have to set this up in the HTML is your table has to have a class of sortable. And then you need to use those HTML5 data attributes in your header tags. So remember, it was data dash, and then whatever name you give it is up to you. Because this is sorting, makes sense to do data dash sort. And then you set that equal to a value. These values are going to become sort methods because text sorts are different than numeric sorts. If you remember from when we talked about sorting a little earlier, you have to do the number sorts a little bit different than text. So whatever you put here becomes methods, and you're going to have to run your data through those methods to help it sort properly. These are the methods that we're going to talk about in a minute, but you will notice that the method name, here name, duration, date, matches the values that we have set for the data attributes. That's really important. Okay, so we have two called name. They can both run through this same name method. Okay, in fact, any text column that we create, we'd want to run through this section of code. Okay, then we've got duration, which is more of a time. And so we've split on the colon, and we've split it into the number of minutes and seconds. And then we have date down here. And before we get into that code, we are going to take a look at the jQuery and what it's doing. So it takes the sortable class, and it's going to process each of the elements that are in basically our table. So it takes the entire table and stores it in a table variable. It looks for the T body element, stores that in T body, and it looks for all the TH elements and stores those in controls. Then all of the TRs, which are the rows, are stored in rows, and they are converted to a JavaScript array so that we can use those array methods. And if you remember, sort and reverse are JavaScript array methods, and those are the ones that we want to use for sorting. Okay, then after that, we have an event handler for when they click on a control. And so the controls are the headings. So the event handler is going to be triggered when they click on any of these headings. So when they click on a heading, the heading they click on is stored in header, and then it goes in and it retrieves the value. So we've got data sort, so it's looking for sort, and it's retrieving the value. That gets stored in order. Okay, and then it's declaring a column variable. The next thing it does is it looks at the column that they clicked on to see if it has the ascending or descending class. Now, when the page first loads, it's not going to have either because we haven't sorted anything yet. Okay, so when the page first loads, it should come down here into the else section. And for the column they clicked on, so if they clicked on title, for this column, it's going to add ascending for the class. And then it's going to remove ascending or descending, either class, from all of the siblings. The next thing it does is it looks at order, And it's just making sure that it has a method to process it. So if we clicked on title, order is going to be name. So it's just checking to make sure we have a name method. Okay, and as long as we do, then it is trying to retrieve the proper column. Okay, so in this case, it's going to retrieve the title column. Then it calls the sort method using the row object. And so we have several rows. So what it's doing in that particular column, okay, it's doing a find on the column and retrieving the text for that column, and it's storing it in A. And then it's looking in the next row. So it's basically retrieving animals and the deer in this case. And so it's looking in the next row and retrieving the text for that column. So it's processing by row, and then within row, it is targeting a specific column. So here in this case, assuming that they've clicked on title, it's going to be retrieving animals and the deer. And then it is sending animals, which is in A, and the deer, which is in B, to compare. And order in this case was name. So that's when it comes up and processes through compare. Okay, and it's going to run through the name method, and it's pulling in the text that was sent, which is, again, animals and the deer. The first thing it does is it replaces the word the with the blank. Because there's so many text entries that start with the, it doesn't produce a very good sort. So it just removes the word the, and then it does its little comparison to see if A is less than B. So it's going to then look to see if animals is less than deer. Okay, and if it is, then it returns a -1. Otherwise, it's going to return a +1 or a 0 if they are the same. Okay, so if A is greater than B, it's a 1. If they had the same letter, it would return a 0. Okay, and it's going to return back to the place it was called, and then it's going to be running through here again. So it processed A and B. So now it's going to be looking at the next two rows, the deer and the ghost. Okay, and so it's going to be taking the deer and the ghost and running that through name, where it's going to remove the word the. So we end up with deer and ghost. It does the comparisons, and then it comes back down here and it processes the next two. So this is very similar to what we saw with the sort processing earlier. It's just the example that we're using is much more complicated. So that is basically how it works once it is done with the sort. And it's going to have to run through here several times to get the correct sort order. But once it's done, it then appends all of the rows onto the body of the table. Okay, so that is how it works. And if you haven't reviewed sorting in JavaScript arrays, I highly recommend reviewing that. There's a couple videos on that, or actually one video. You want to review that because that will help you understand what's going on in here.